All right, folks, we're going to step aside with our coverage from Las Vegas to turn to Tennessee, where our understanding is the jury has let the court know that they have reached a verdict. It looks like about 11 hours and 49 minutes or so it took them to come up with this verdict. I do hear some audio coming from the courtroom, so let's go out to that courtroom in Tennessee.
Count 1, premeditated first-degree murder of Jennifer Paxton. We, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of criminally negligent homicide. Verdict form for count 2, first-degree felony murder of Jennifer Paxton during the perpetration of attempt to perpetrate aggravated rape. We, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of first-degree felony murder during the perpetration or attempt to perpetrate for aggravated rape. Next, count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of first-degree felony murder during the perpetration or attempt to perpetrate aggravated kidnapping. Count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of attempted aggravated rape. Count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, not guilty of the case of aggravated rape with bodily injury to Jennifer Paxton. Count 5, aggravated rape, aiding or abetting with one or more persons. We, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of aggravated rape. Count 7, we, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of aggravated kidnapping. Count 8, we, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of especially aggravated kidnapping. Count 9, we, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, not guilty of conspiracy to commit premeditated first-degree murder. Count 10, we, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of conspiracy to commit aggravated rape. Count 11, we, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of conspiracy to commit aggravated kidnapping. We, the jury, find the defendant, count 12, we, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of abuse of a corpse. And finally, count 13, regarding tampering evidence, we, the jury, find the defendant, Shannon Finnegan, guilty of tampering with evidence. Thank you. You can have a seat, please. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that means we've still got some more work to do. But first thing I have to do is I have to poll the jury. And so don't worry about your prior numbers. I'm just going to go down the line and refer to you by number to make sure everybody agrees with these verdicts that I just read in there. Juror number 1 on the back row, is that your verdict, sir?
Yes.
Juror number 2?
Yes.
Juror number 3?
Yes.
Juror number 4?
Yes.
Juror number 5?
Yes.
Juror number 6?
Yes.
Juror number 7?
Yes.
Juror number 8?
Yes.
Juror number 9?
Yes.
Juror number 10?
Yes.
Juror number 11?
Yes.
And juror number 12?
Yes.
All right, our plan is this. We'll let y'all go in just a moment. I think dinner's already there at the hotel. I want y'all to come back at 10 in the morning. The reason for that is the lawyers and I have some work to do before this other case is presented to you, or this mini trial as we've talked about. And tomorrow we'll learn about aggravators and mitigators. And then I'll give you some instructions on that, and y'all will get to work on that as well. I remember my instructions to you. I know you've done a lot of work. I know you've worked really hard back there, and I really, really appreciate that. So we can't ruin this now by y'all going and talking to each other about this individually. So please don't do that. I'll have to ask you again tomorrow morning to raise your hand and say you did, but please don't do that. You've done great so far, and I really appreciate your work, but we've still got a little bit more work to do. So I look forward to seeing y'all in the morning, and thank you for working so hard yesterday and today and reaching a verdict in this case, and we'll go from there, okay? All right, so everybody rise, please.
All rise.
I'll see y'all tomorrow morning.
Here, follow me.
Judge.
Yes, ma'am. I probably need to, Deputy, I probably need to talk
Jimmy. Jenny.
I probably need to talk to the alternates sometime after they all leave. Bring the 2 alternates in there.
Yes, sir.
And when you got them, bring them in there, and then tell me you got them, and I'll bring them in.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Have a seat, please. So tomorrow, if y'all can be here at 8:30, I know y'all filed like 3 motions. I've got to address and take care of those.
Yes, sir.
And then obviously we'll have to do jury instructions and talk about those things as well. But if y'all will have your aggravating evidence ready tomorrow morning at 10, and then if y'all will have your mitigation evidence tomorrow, then we'll start going from there.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything for the state I need to do?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, anything for the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll stand and y'all can wait if you want to. All I'm going to do is tell the 2 alternates that we've reached a verdict in regard to this part of the trial, and I'm still keeping them. They'll go back to the hotel. They can't have contact with anybody. They can't talk about the case. They'll come back, and then we'll see how we do on the mitigation stuff. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll stand in recess. Everyone rise, please. We'll be adjourned until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Thank you. Yes.
You gotta put it on record.
What?
All right, so after 11 hours and 49 minutes, the jury has reached a verdict in the case versus Sean Finnegan, and it took them 11 hours, and one can understand with all the different charges. I'll go through just a couple, not all. They found him guilty of criminally negligent homicide, but more importantly, the headline here, guilty of first-degree felony murder, the underlying felony being aggravated rape, also first-degree murder, the underlying kidnapping as well, that's an aggravator, attempted aggravated rape. He was found guilty, but not guilty of aggravated rape, and then a bunch of guilties: guilty of aggravated rape, guilty of aggravated kidnapping, conspiracy to commit aggravated kidnapping, and on and on. The jury is set to return tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. You heard the judge say that the lawyers will be back a little earlier, around 8:30, to take care of some motions, and they will begin to consider the penalty. And of course, the penalty in this case, based on these convictions, is the death penalty. All right, let's bring in our guests with us, joining us to discuss this hour. Former prosecutor Tommy Pope. Tommy, you heard the verdict there. We were all sort of wondering what was taking this jury so long. Forgot there were so many charges that they had to go through. It makes sense, but still 11 hours seems a bit long. Your reaction to the verdict?
Once I heard the verdicts and all the different details of the different verdicts, I understood a little better. Quite candidly, as a prosecutor, I was a little concerned they were taking so long based on the case I had seen. And then when they came out, you know, we always say a death penalty is a 2-part trial, and you almost want to slam dunk on guilt, which I thought they had pretty well. But when you started hearing a couple not guilties mixed in, it was a little bit concerning. But as you pointed out to your viewers, the bigger ones, the ones that carried the day, the aggravating ones, the sexual assault, the kidnapping, the things of those nature that give you these aggravating circumstances for the death penalty are still present. And one thing that was interesting to me, in South Carolina, we actually have what we call a 24-hour cooling down period, where the jurors, even though they're sequestered, can kind of get over the heat of passion of having to deliberate on the guilt phase. But it sounds like to me they're going to get to work in the morning on aggravation and mitigation.
Yeah, no doubt. No rest for this jury. They're going to be back again, like you said, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. to begin hearing the evidence in the second phase of the case. Now, I will say this. I thought one of the things that the defense did well in this case was sort of create this idea that maybe he wasn't as guilty as the person, his girlfriend, Rebecca Dishman, who testified against him. And I felt all along this was sort of a long walk to this penalty phase. That may come back to help him. There are a lot of aggravating factors. These are ugly charges. It's an ugly case. But the fact that there might have been some thinking that perhaps Rebecca was more involved than she let on in her testimony, that could help him in sentencing.
And I think at this point, too, I mean, what's he got to lose to get up there and tell him that, basically? You know, they let him, I don't think he testified before, let him hear that from him. You know, again, she seems timid and he seems scary, so how far that carries the day. But there are some parts in there that the not guilties that I think they give the defense a little bit of hope, where based on the nature of this case, there may not have been much to start out with.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of different counts of the rape in terms of different times that he's accused of having done that or alleged to have done it. So, but they definitely did find him guilty of aggravated rape and kidnapping as well. So I think he's got a tough situation coming up starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. All right, Tommy Pope, stick around. We're going to take a break now. When we return, we're going to go back to Las Vegas, where the lead detective will be on the stand. My understanding is he is the last witness called by the state. So we'll have that more. Keep it here on Court TV, the front row seat to justice.
Of an investigative reporter as our experts weigh in.
Closing arguments with Vinny Politan tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
The WNBA is on IO this week. Features an Eastern Conference matchup face off against the Connecticut Sun, followed by Vegas Aces. Coverage starts Friday at 7. Check local listings for games in your area. IO, it's on.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. If you're just joining us, just moments ago, a Tennessee jury found Sean Finnegan guilty of a number of charges. The top charge being basically first-degree murder with an underlying felony of kidnapping, first-degree felony murder with an underlying charge of aggravated rape, a series of attempted rapes, and also guilty on aggravated rape, aggravated kidnapping, series of charges. He does, of course, as a result of these convictions, now face the death penalty. That jury is expected to return tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. They'll get the two alternates. They'll let them go. That jury will come back and deliberate and will hear evidence first on all the aggravating, mitigating factors as well, and then determine what his punishment will be. Again, he is facing the death penalty. Let's bring back in our guest, still with us to discuss, former prosecutor Tommy Pope. Tommy, again, this is a difficult case. A lot of aggravating factors involved here. What do you think this jury might do as far as the punishment is concerned?
I think this is at least from the outside, a pretty strong case for the death penalty based on the torture, based on what they found. And, you know, again, the co-defendant who had pled out indicated, you know, I think she came pretty clean and I think she was pretty credible. I think he's fighting an uphill battle, you know, based on the jury verdict and all the aggravating circumstances that they've already found beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think it'll be very interesting, really, to hear what the mitigation may be.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Maybe there's something in his background. But again, I think it might go back to this idea that perhaps he was somewhat, at least this was what it sounded like in the closing argument, he was somewhat of a victim in this case. I think that's going to be a difficult sell, the idea that she killed this young lady out of jealousy or some other reason. He came back and he had no choice but to help out to hide this murder because, of course, he would have ended up in the very same place. These were exact words of his attorney. Had he went and told what happened, he would still be sitting there charged with murder. Do you agree?
I think that's why Mama tells us, you know, where you're not supposed to go after midnight because you end up in places and circumstances. I think his conduct led up to this. Plus, again, the way this witness presented herself, I just don't know that I see her, you know, controlling him. And I mean, he sounded like he was, you know, brutalizing her. She sounded kind of like the battered spouse in this scenario. I just really, I don't see that carrying the day.
You know, I certainly see a scenario where maybe she had more to do with it than she let on, but I certainly think he had a lot to do with it as well. The jury did hear, Tommy, that she is actually in jail, spending the rest of her life in prison, not the death penalty. Do you think that might have any effect on the way this jury looks at his punishment?
You know, we had a death penalty case where a guy had killed his parents for the inheritance, and he had a young lady that hung with him throughout, and it was really, again, kind of the thing where her best option was to stick with him, even though he's now murdered his parents. And so, you know, that is something for them to work with. Again, just from what I've seen from the outside, I don't know how much traction they'll get with it, Mike.
Yeah, you know, the jury had a couple of questions. One of the things they asked for, and I want to know if you've ever had a case where this happened, they asked to see the indictment in the case. There was some issue here brought up by the defense as to when the indictment came down and when this happened. That might have been the impetus for it. But have you ever had that happen? Now, of course, it wasn't given to them because the judge told them the indictment is not evidence in the case, so they did not get it. But what do you make of that question?
You know, traditionally, if I have had anything like that, it was more that I'm, you know, in closing argument, when you know, either open on the law or you're talking about the law, that I explain these are the charging papers. And sometimes it can be they're using the indictment to try to more fully understand the judge's jury instruction, you know, because, you know, you and I studied in law school, but those jurors are getting a lot from the judge in these instructions and trying to retain it. So sometimes it can be as simple as, reading a couple words, maliciously, intentionally, things of that nature in the indictment. And that's a possibility. If it gets to when they indicted, that's also concerning for the prosecution if suddenly they are, maybe following one of these rabbit trails on when he was charged and why he was charged.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about at the end of the day, and maybe that's why it took them so long. But again, it'd be interesting to find out what exactly took them so long. Folks, if you're just joining us, Sean Finnegan has been found guilty by that Tennessee jury of a number of charges, the most important ones being criminally negligent homicide, first-degree felony murder with the underlying felonies of aggravated rape and kidnapping as well. There was one not guilty for aggravated rape. Again, I'd love to know the explanation for that. Again, there were a series of rapes that were accused, or he was alleged to have done. Maybe one of them they found that he didn't do. But at the end of the day, they'll be back tomorrow morning to begin determining whether he will face the death penalty in this case.